Hi, everybody, and happy solstice, the longest summer solstice, the longest day of the year. I have a ton to go over today. I woke up and I was like, okay, I had started preparing last night and I wanted to just put everything together. But there's so many bits and pieces, right? Because we have the summer solstice, which of course starts the summer. And then that is always tied to Cancer, and the sign of Cancer. And Cancer is also the first of the water elements of the year, right? We start the year off in Aries with fire, and we just now get to that element of water in the astrological tradition. And then I also wanted to bring in some information about summer and the fire element in the Taoist tradition. So there was a lot that came in, and as I'm sitting with this, I'm just really working on it throughout the day. Instead of just clarity on how to connect those points, I got led to all these different points. And eventually there was this like meandering path that became this like, oh, this is where we're going. This is what we're going to do. But it requires a lot of different things to come together. So it's going to be a longer video. It's going to be fun. And we're really diving into some of the, more esoteric pieces of Western astrology and traditions. We're going to dive into some of the Roman practices around this time of year. We're going to be digging into some of the mythology around the sign of Cancer. We're going to then take this and look at it through the tarot and put all these pieces together. And what we're putting together is, how are we working with Cancer? And how are we working with the summer, right? And in particular with Cancer and with the sign of Cancer, in most astrology, you hear about the sign of Cancer and it's all about emotions, the moon, mother figure. I talk about this all the time in my Returning to Nature's Rhythm course. That's what we're working on, is self-nurturing, self-mothering, taking care of ourselves. And so it is a great time to be working on that energy. At the same time, though, at a deeper level, there's the question of what are we nurturing, right? What are we cultivating? If Cancer is related to the moon and related to this water element, and this period of gestation, what are we gestating? And the answer to that came up through all these different bits and pieces that arose for me is we are cultivating the ability to be aligned, and not only aligned but connected and strong enough to present and to live our highest good, or our higher self, or if you want to call it Christ consciousness, or Krishna consciousness, right? Or our divine spark, or our soul, right? There's a ton of different ways to talk about this, but that is what we are in essence cultivating. There is the fact that part of it is just like making sure we have good, healthy food and nutrition, right? We need that. We need that to be able to express our highest self. That is just as important of a part. Part of it is making sure that we're emotionally connected and taking care of ourselves. Mind, body, spirit, they all have to be taken care of. They all have to be self-mothered, right? And nurtured and nourished. But this is the spark that we're really working on nurturing and nourishing. And when you dig in, if you go back enough and you dig into the symbols associated with Cancer, you see this story narrative, right? This story narrative of nurturing and nourishing this divine spark, in the face of all sorts of struggles, right? And so that is really where I will be leading this. There's a lot of different context pieces, though. So in order to get to there, and get to this underbelly of the Cancer sign, right? I was really excited because I feel like this really does explain certain parts of people who have a lot of Cancer energy that don't get explained when they're told, like, oh, you're just going to be an emotional like person and cry over everything and like get really like just really emotionally reactive and want to take care of and love everybody, and be everybody's mom, and then maybe uh, overreact to things and get overly crabby. That's what cancers or pop psychology, or not psychology, pop astrology are known for, right? But there's other levels, right? Every time I talk to a Cancer, they're like, yeah, it doesn't really match up, right? Because there's also instinct and there's intuition and there's this kind of really deep core of gestating this essential self. So before we take the path to there, I want to get a lay of the land, right? We have to talk about Cancer as its own sign. We have to talk about the solstice, and we have to talk about summer. So let's start with the solstice. It's the longest day of the year, and so from this point on, the days get shorter, right? It always throws me for a loop because we think summer, like we think sun, like warmth. The weather is the nicest of the year typically if we're really fond of the sun. But the days are actually getting shorter from this point until we reach the fall equinox when they're equal with the nights, and then it just keeps getting darker and darker. So what we are at right now is we are at the peak of the solar energy, right? And we're at the peak of life's vitality. All winter and spring, the sun has slowly been growing in its length of days, right? It's slowly been growing in its power. It starts with Capricorn, which starts that cycle with the winter solstice, and it starts to grow through the winter and through the spring. And in spring, we start to see the plant life come alive, right? And this feeds into the story of the zodiac. But you start to see plant life come alive. You start to see it bloom. You start to see it pollinated. Here now, it's gestating in the sign of Cancer, and it's going to start to ripen over the summer, then get harvested. But this point of the sun is really actually going to be the sun's decline. It just so happens that we've stored up enough energy from its rise through the spring, and there's still enough energy being released before it meets that equinox that it gives us a surplus with which to live, right? It gives us all the ripening of our fruits and our vegetables. It gives us our harvest. It gives us plenty of energy to do a ton of more activity. It gives us space and room to do a ton more activity. I live in Portland, like all the roads get torn up in the summer, all the construction happens in the summer because you can't do it in the winter. And so all of this stuff happens, and it's a time of activity, which will go into the explanation of the fire element from the Taoist tradition and how it relates to summer. But I want to back up and launch into an explanation of Cancer. While we keep this idea of the fact that summer starts here with this first day of Cancer, right? And it runs Cancer, Leo, Virgo. It runs through these three signs, and it really is. It is almost metaphorically the sacrifice of the sun as the sun starts to diminish to give surplus to the world, right? And you see that in a lot of solar myths. So let's come back to Cancer here. We have Cancer in the fourth house, which is typically called the house of the home. It's ruled by Luna. We started off with Aries as the first fire sign. That's what starts off from the spring equinox when the sun is getting stronger. And from Aries and that passion, that energy, that vitality that starts. I mean, it's when trees first start growing their leaves back if they're deciduous, right? It's when you start to see shoots and sprouts coming from the ground. It's when life really starts to wake up. You hear more bird calls. Life is energizing itself after the long winter and fall. And then you enter into Taurus, which is the first of the earth elements. And it acts as a container for for that fire, that life, that passion, that energy, right? It acts as a container, and suddenly we're more full formed. In the plant life, you start to see blossoms, you start to see blooms, you start to see them opening up, right? Acting as a container for pollination. In physical, like animal life, we're talking about the bodies that take that spark of life from Aries and start to interact with each other, right? And then Gemini is that interaction, it's that pollination, it's that exchange of thoughts and ideas, it's that exchange of conversations and the way that we interact with each other. And then now you have Cancer, where the flowers are pollinated, the petals are pretty much all gone now, right? They've all kind of wilted away. What is it? I won't try to go into the biology because I don't remember it right now, but it has been fertilized, right? The bloom has been fertilized. It's time to start fruiting. And animal life, I mean, this would be called like the gestating phase, right? You are gestating new life. And so, needed some water there. So we're gestating this new life. And it is here in the sign of Cancer that we first come on to the water elements. And this will play into some of what we talk about some of these energies with Cancer. Because what came to me during meditating is how tied in water is. Water tends to be the element that rules over instinct, intuition, emotional intuition specifically, and emotions in our inner realms, right? Fire is all about like alignment and that just like kind of spiritual passion of like, I need to be here, I need to do this thing, I need to do that thing. Earth is about practicality and our physical bodies and the physical realm and world. Air is that cerebral, mental space. Water is our emotional space. And more so than the other elements, because it is our emotional space, it is a very reactive space, right? It is very much in tune with what is happening around us and what is happening within us. You don't necessarily have that much like you're not as tied to the reactions and the other elements as you are with water. For instance, while some people can have intrusive thoughts, I've definitely experienced them. We can choose to think about different things, right? I can choose to think about Napoleon, which apparently I'm choosing to think about European history. I can choose to think about my favorite books. I can choose to have these thoughts play out in a somewhat structured order and explore those thoughts, right? I can choose to take this physical body, this earthy body, and go from here to there. I can choose what foods I'm eating, right? We can choose different parts of that earthy experience. We can choose different parts of that air experience and the conversations that we have. Fire is probably a little bit more like water in the fact that it isn't as much of a choice sometimes. Like a lot of the time, it's a lot more compulsive, I feel like, because it's about that alignment. Like, where are we in alignment to that spiritual essence? So it's not as much of a choice as being aligned. But even that isn't necessarily reactive the way that water is, because water is, it is our emotions are linked to our sympathetic system, right? Our emotions are linked to the experiences that we have. And we cannot choose to have different emotions at different times. We can manipulate our emotions. We can watch a comedy to cheer ourselves up. We can watch a horror movie to scare ourselves. We can work with our breath to bring down our anxiety and our stress levels. We can work with supplements, or we can take pharmaceuticals to change our biochemistry and change certain mindsets or mind states. We can meditate. We can do a whole bunch of different things. We can exercise to change our mind states. And so we can affect our emotions and we can manipulate our emotions, but there's no way for me to just receive horrible news that's just really devastating and be like, I'm going to choose to be super joyful right now, right? Like, if we have conditioned ourselves with certain metaphysical beliefs and we've done a lot of work and we've meditated and we've done all this stuff, then maybe after I have that initial, like, oh, okay, well, now I want to cry or sob or whatever, or be in shock, I can work on myself and be like, okay, well, this makes sense. And that was just the way it was. I don't know, whatever it is that whatever narrative generates itself. But we're going to have that gut level instinct. There is a connection from the watery realm to the events and around us and how they affect us. And where this becomes really important is it becomes very important in the narrative around Cancer season, right? When we put the narrative and we put focus on the archetype and the symbol of the mother, right? And how the mother is nurturing and nourishing, and how we're trying to take care of ourselves or trying to take care of other people. It, what is a word for that? It focuses, I'm trying to find a way to express this. Um, hmm, Mercury is in the sign of Cancer, and it's not necessarily the best for communicating ideas the way that Gemini or Virgo could do. It has to be more felt. So it's a condensing down when we work with that metaphor of the mother and the archetype. It takes our vision and it boils it down to a mother holding a child, right? A mother creating food and nurturing and nourishing other people, or holding a sobbing child. When a lot of the Cancer experience and the experience of Cancer energy is going to be very responsive to the world around in the way that a mother, whether, and I want to break the gender binaries here, right? Whether mother be male or female, we're talking about like a very nurturing, protective caretaker. So you will see that more. You will see that responsiveness more in nurturing, protecting caretakers, right? Where they are more, if there are kids around, I am scanning the roads. People call me a mother hen, right? Like if there are kids around, I am paying attention to everything around me because I'm like, we got to make sure these kids are okay. Like if they're having emotional difficulties, I'm there to soothe them. I'm there to help them out. I do a lot of mothering when I'm around children. I do a lot of mothering in general. And so it does have that reactiveness, right? There is, and it's been good. I've like been able to catch children falling from places and like the high seat or a high chair gives out and I'm there because I've been paying so much, like my mind is just zoned in. I'm paying attention to this kid. Sister almost got run over by a biker and I was able to be there because I got my senses out there. And so we do have that reactiveness, but that's not typically what we are invoking when we talk about the archetype, right? When we're invoking about talking the archetype, we tend to talk about this sort of condensing down and taking care of people in these very intimate experiences. Whereas a lot of that Cancer energy experience is going to be very environmentally experienced, and it can be a challenging experience, right? The three water elements are Pisces, Cancer, and Scorpio. And Cancer starts it. When we talk about Scorpio, people talk about challenging experiences and people talk about power play and these warring instincts and traumatic experiences. And people expect that out of Scorpio energy. When people talk about Pisces, we tend to talk about dreaminess and we tend to talk about spaciness and an artistic aesthetic and experience, a spiritual artistic experience of the world. all three of these signs, because they're water-based, are going to be very tied into the world around them. And the reason why I'm trying to illustrate this point is because it goes into the narrative of the sign of Cancer, right? The sign of Cancer is the crab, and it comes out of the story of Hercules. It's the first sign that's related to the story of Hercules. We've got Aries the ram, which is related to like Jason and the Argonauts. We got Taurus the bull, which is related to the bull of heaven or the cow of heaven, depending on which tradition. You got Gemini the twins, which is related to Castor and Pollux. And now you have this random crab, right? That comes out of the story of Hera sending this crab to try to kill Hercules while he is battling the Hydra. And this is part of the narrative that I really want to bring out here today. Cancer is related to the mother, but as we all know, our mothers aren't necessarily always the like nicest, sweetest people, right? Some people have amazingly nice, sweet mothers, but no matter who we are, our mothers are human, right? They're not the perfect archetype. They're not the perfect mother, right? There's going to be challenges that arise with our mothers. There's going to be great things that happen with our mothers, but there's a mixture of a challenge to who we are, right? And a challenge of our environment and our interaction with our mothers, and the nurturing that our mothers can also bring, and the support that our mothers can also bring. And you have both of these here. You have both of these here in the sign of Cancer. Astrology is not naive. Astrology understands that there is duality to this archetype. This isn't supposed to be the perfect mother archetype who just takes care of you no matter what and is able to fix every wrong and just like kiss all your wounds goodbye. It's supposed to have that duality, and that duality is so clearly illustrated in the story of Heracles, the story of Hercules, as he's more commonly known. You have Hera, who is pissed off at her husband Zeus for having all these affairs. Hercules is one of the children of this, of one of the bastard children of these affairs. And so she's constantly trying to destroy his life. Constantly trying to destroy his life. But by trying to destroy his life, she actually invokes the very pressure that creates him as a hero. The story of Hercules, let's just pop out here real quick, because this is going to go into everything else that we're getting into. The story of Hercules really starts when Hera finds a way to get him to go insane, drives him insane, and he kills his family. And he's just like, he comes out of the insanity, he gets healed from the insanity, and he's devastated, right? He's absolutely devastated. And then he begins his quest for redemption. And through going through those quests for redemption, he transforms. He invokes the hero that he is. He changes the entire world around him. He's constantly putting down monsters from previous eras. He ends human sacrifices in parts of the Greek world. He's credited for ending human sacrifice. He reforms different parts of society, right? He makes a better world as he tries to heal from the damage that he's done and the damage that was really also inflicted upon him. And so that relationship with Hera gets really exposed here, where she is kind of the dark side of that caring mother. And there is, let me search through it through all the images. I was like, we have to go through all these things. There is a precedence from this, from the Etruscan tradition. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Etruscans, they came a little bit before Rome, right? So they were this interesting culture. We don't know too much about them, but a lot of Roman myths also relate to the Etruscan, right? And they all kind of overlap, right? Roman tradition, Greek tradition, Etruscan tradition. And so this is a mirror. This is an Etruscan mirror, and it portrays Hera suckling Hercules, who in the Greek and Roman traditions are just constantly, Hercules is constantly oppressed by Hera, right? Until he ascends as part of his divinity. But in this Etruscan narrative, you have this story of, and we don't know much, right? So in the Etruscan, this is Hercule and this is Uni. We don't know much about their story. We assume that it is somewhat like the Greek and Roman story, but we don't know enough to really know. But the image that has always come to me is that this is essentially the dark mother of traumatic experiences, right? The world applies pressure. Our environment applies pressure, and we emotionally respond to it. The question is, what are we cultivating from this response? We can become our own monsters in response to this, right? We can just lament our lives, like that Hercules' insanity caused the death of his children, or we rise to the occasion, right? And we choose to challenge the fates, which brings me into a discussion about fate. But we can choose to essentially challenge the experience that we're having from that world, and to respond in our own way, right? To respond as this essence of our highest self, as this divine spark. And that brings me to the Roman practice on solstice. Was to essentially, people would gather in Rome, they would float down the river to the temple of Fortuna. They would do some sort of practice there that nobody now knows what, as most things from the pagan traditions were lost, and a lot of them were kept secret. And then they would row themselves back up to Rome, typically intoxicated. So on the very day of solstice, you have this connection to the Roman goddess Fortuna. And this is really what started all this thought process. Because Fortuna, she gives good fate. She gives not happy fate, right? She gives out good things. She gives out things we would rather not experience. But part of the Roman belief around Fortuna and around our fortunes was that regardless of what fortune or fate give us, a healthy, good person makes the best out of all of it, right? The world can be a storm around us, and like we talked about, water and Cancer energy is going to be very reactive to all of that, right? There can be a ton of pressures, and that water energy is going to be very reactive to it. But in the Roman tradition, a sign of your self-development was your ability to hold stable in all of that, right? So from this, I really want to paint these archetypes. We've got this motherly archetype of Cancer, right? Where you nurture and you nourish and you take care of and you love and you protect. We have this almost harsh world mother archetype that can happen, where the world just throws things at you and you got to survive. And we have Fortuna, who is giving both of these, right? Gives you those times and experiences of love and acceptance and nurturing and everything that you need. And gives you those experiences of like, what the F is happening today? Why does the universe hate me? This experience is really hard and challenging. Cancer energy and water energy is going to respond to all of this. And the intimate relationship that was played with Fortuna in the Roman tradition was, and it's Rome, so it's super misogynistic, but they believed there was a virtue, a manly virtue of virtus. And think Cicero, who applied this also to women, one of the few writers, maybe the only writer who actually did, and talked about women's virtus. which was great. But they had this concept of virtus, and I invite us all, take it and run with it, call it whatever you want to. But this essential virtue that was that ability to hold stable in the eye of the storm and do what needed to be done, right? Take care of what needed to be done and do it right. It is the act of being virtuous, being just in every single one of your decisions, whether fortune hands you a loving goddess who is taking care of everything you need, or God who is taking care of everything you need, or a pile of crap, right? We do what is right and what is just in every one of those experiences. And that was seen as, it was noted. People were known by their virtus. They were known by their virtues and their ability to stay in the eye of the storm. And one of the stories that is told that was used to illustrate this, a person who was very well known for his virtues, or his virtus, and I'm going to destroy this name because I'm not the best at names, but Lucius Quintius Cincinnatus. And I cannot tell you how that is supposed to be pronounced, but that is how I did it. There was a story told of this Roman farmer, and the Roman army was getting pushed back. I believe this is in the time of the Republic, so they would have had a senate, and then in times of emergency, when the sun just peeked out, hi sun, for the summer solstice, so the lighting's all going to be off. It's been behind clouds all day. So he's peeking out for this story. So there was this Roman farmer, and in times of emergency, essentially, Rome would go and they'd cast lots, or they'd do something in order to find the person who was supposed to lead and the emergency. I don't think it was a casting of lots. I don't remember exactly what it was right now, but it was non-hierarchical, right? This was before the Roman Empire, so they weren't like, oh, this is who leads. They would draw from the random from the populace, and the reason why they would do that is so that no one had too much power, right? So they go and they go to Lucius, and they're like, hey, we're getting the Roman army is getting its ass kicked. We need someone to help and fix this. And he's in the middle of plowing, and he looks to the messengers who've come for him, and he's like, if I leave now, I'm in the middle of plowing. I haven't even sowed my crops yet. This can hurt me in the future, and I might not have what I need in the future. And the messengers are like, but this is for everybody. This is for the entire Roman people. This is for all of your people. We need you. So he goes and he fights one of the shortest wars around in the Roman days, right? It was said I think it took 15 days. He beats the enemy and he comes directly back home to the plow that is still sitting in there in the fields, and he just keeps on going, right? He doesn't go back to Rome to be praised. He doesn't try to increase his political power. He just does what needs to be done. He doesn't blink at it. He doesn't cry about it, right? And he comes home and he does, and he continues to do what needs to be done. And that was the concept of virtus. And so it really, that ability to remain calm in the eye of the storm is that peace that comes with that story of Cancer, right? We also have Heracles, who would be able to overcome the challenges of all these monsters, hydras and fire-breathing lions and boars made of iron and all these things, right? Or boars with hides that are as indestructible as iron. All these things come at him, and he remains calm. He takes care of them. He overcomes them time and time again. And when even his own mind and body rebel against him and cause these tragedies, he collects himself. He moves forward time and time again. So when we're asking, what are we cultivating, right? What are we nurturing? What is this child that we're gestating? We are nurturing and we're gestating this inner hero, right? We're nurturing and we're gestating the spark of the divinity that allows us to do the work that we're meant to do in this life and in this world over and over and over again, no matter what tides come to us, whether they be nice, relaxing, loving, nurturing tides, or they be really difficult, challenging tides. We move through them all, and we invoke our own inner mother to nurture and nourish us, so that we have the energy and the strength that we need to do that. And so that's what brings us to the tarot, right? So I had a momentary mind blip that I have now edited out. So we're going to share the Queen of Cups, because the Queen of Cups rules over the first 2 decans of Cancer. And we've talked about her before if you've been following along with my other videos, because we talked about her in Taurus season, right? And so this rules over the entrance into the Cancer, and you have the Queen staring at her cup, right? It's sealed, right? So there's this mystery within. There, she is sitting above these rivers. There's that element of water. She is enthroned, she is empowered, and she is gazing into, if you will, the mysteries of that inner realm, the mysteries of that inner world. She's mastered that element in the inner world. And it is sealed, right? So it is, in its own way, this goblet or whatever it is that she is holding, this grail, it is in its own way a womb space, right? It is in its own way this closed space to nurture, to gather her energies, to gather that yin energy, and to then use that to bring it forth. And the last decan of Cancer, which enters into the energy of Leo season, is given over to the King of Wands. And let's find him here. We've got the King of Wands. And so that energy that starts with the Queen, that nurturing, nourishing love, turns into the most active of all the kings, right? The fire energy of the Wands. This fire king who is himself very active. The energy and mastery of that inner realm turns into a yang type energy that is able to go out and overcome, is able to go out and express itself, is able to go out and invoke that energy of fire, which gets birthed from Cancer season and the water element into Leo season, and the sign of the king and that fire element expressing itself. It is able to come out of this internal nurtured space and to do what needs to do, which brings us to the card that is related to Cancer, which until today I could not understand why. Honestly, I couldn't understand why. It's the Chariot. The Chariot is this card that talks about just overcoming and accomplishing, right? You make things happen by your force of will, which, definitely people with Cancer energy can do that, but they're not stereotypically known as the people who are going to make things happen according to their will. That would sound more like an Aries or a Capricorn, or maybe a Taurus because of that fixed earth energy, or a Scorpio because of that fixed water energy. But that wouldn't be your first description typically of Cancer energy, right? But it is the card that is aligned to the tarot. And I believe it is because of this energy of Virtus, because of this energy of what Cancer is able to nurture and nourish, what Cancer is able to really invoke and give birth to, that divine energy, that divine spark, that experience of the highest self, take care of all of our needs to cultivate the self, that regardless of what is happening in the world around us, we are able to press forward. That has to be rooted, right? It has to be rooted in that contemplation of the queen. It has to be rooted in that emotional realm of instinct and intuition. It has to be rooted in our ability to care for ourselves, to give ourselves and meet our own needs, to nurture and nourish ourselves, to eat healthy, good food, to make sure our bodies are well taken care of, to make sure that we have exercise, to make sure we are emotionally supported. We have to be able to support all of that process in order to develop the strength of character and the strength of being to go out and overcome things, right? To go out and overcome the obstacles that happen in the world. And so you see that with this chariot who represents that force, that ability to conquer. He has the signs of the moon on his arms, right? He has these crescent, outward facing moons that are facing the world around, right? Receiving experiences from them. He's got the square that represents physicality, right? In the world of the physical. He is not bothering to rule over the two sphinxes by force of might, right? He's not holding reins. He's holding a wand. It is simply by force of will that he directs his chariot. He's crowned and throned beneath this canopy of stars, talking about how the dance of stars and astrology affects this entire process. He is girded in the esoteric and its symbols, right? And he is drawn by these sphinx of differing colors, right? The duality of experience, that duality of being able to push through, whether it be night or it be day, that duality of being able to push through, whether the world is treating you like a loving, amazing mother, treating and spoiling her child, and not spoiling, I guess that would be amazing, but just like doting and loving on her child, or the world is treating you like Hera did Hercules, right? Like he's able to push through, the chariot is able to push through no matter what. And you have other signs of duality, like the image of the lingam and yoni. And then you have the image of the rising sun from the Egyptian tradition, and that dawning aspect. So this requires, though, it requires that work of that gestation, of that yin energy, of nurturing the roots, and then it allows you to really expand. And that expands on into Leo season, right? Where you're able to really, really shine with your passion and with your fiery experience and who that soul energy is. But it starts here. It starts here in the time of Cancer. And this is going to bring us into now, how does this relate to the Taoist tradition and the summer that Cancer also begins and initiates? And let me find that image here real quick. Okay, so in the Taoist tradition, spring is ruled over by wood or tree energy, as my teacher taught it. Summer is ruled over by fire. Earth either gets chopped up into many seasons scattered throughout the year, or it's that like harvest season at the end of the year. The two yang elements of the Taoist 5 elements or motions, is kind of closer to what it would be, is tree and fire. Tree is nurtured and nourished in the element of water. So in winter, we gather our dreams, we gather our thoughts, we gather our experiences, we let our energy be really low. Medical writers for Chinese medicine talked about sleeping in late, going to bed early in the winter, gathering your energy. Then we slowly start to put that energy out, right? We start to cultivate ourselves. We start planting our fields. We start cultivating our trees. The world around us is slowly pressing forward. The world around us and the agricultural life is slowly coming to life and growing and growing and growing. Trees and saplings are growing and growing and growing. The sun is growing in its power. And then you enter into the realm of fire. where things start to ripen through the summer. There is an excess of energy, and the fact that the sun and all that warmth, all that heat, all that light means there's a ton of kinetic energy out there, right? It is being absorbed by the plants. It's being turned in. It's being used to ripen fruit, right? We're eating that fruit, and that fruit's really high in sugar, so we've got more energy than we would in the winter when we're eating mainly root vegetables and salted meats. I mean, if we were eating with the seasons, this would be the season where we have an excess of energy, right? And you see it in the grocery store still, to a point, right? You have more fruit, you have more produce, you have an excess of things coming in to consume, right? The energy is abundant. The Chinese medical writers would talk about in the summer, in the winter, you go to bed early, you wake up late. In the summer, you go to bed late, you wake up early, because there's an abundance of energy. For those of you who have manic depressive experiences, a lot of people have more manic energy in the summer because there is this abundance of energy. And it is built off of that slow growth of the tree and of that spring energy. So here, when we're talking about this in relationship to Cancer, what we can talk about is now is the best time to be invoking experiences, right? Fire energy, when it comes to like people who have more fire energy in the Taoist tradition, they're going to be the people who want to try new restaurants, want to try new things, want to go explore, want to go to different countries, want to have all these experiences. And they can do so because there's so much extra energy that whether the universe gives them a nice, positive, motherly experience, or whether the universe gives him the Hera, like, challenging experience, they have energy to overcome the challenges and to love and delight and indulge in the awesome experiences, right? Summer has that fiery energy. It is a time to explore more. It is a time to get the stuff done that we didn't have the energy to do the rest of the year. It is a time to try new things. It is a time to wade into the world of experience and overcome the obstacles and take delight in the abundance and enjoy it all, because there is that excess of energy now that we can channel into all of these things, right? Hold up in the winter, like in that winter water energy or that metal energy, hold up, crawl under the covers, do whatever it is you need to do to conserve your energy. But in the summer, let it out more. And start that process here with Cancer, with the understanding that we're not just randomly running into everything, right? We want to cultivate and channel this energy, right? We want to cultivate this energy and use it to self-nurture, to self-nourish, to take care of ourselves, take care of our roots, take care of that. If we look down at a chart, and as if it were a natal chart, the fact that Cancer rules over the fourth house, it rules that fourth house is always going to be in the bottom of a person's chart, right? It's the roots of who they are. It's how they soak in energy. So use this excess energy to take care of yourself, to cultivate yourself, knowing that what you're cultivating is your highest good, your true self. And then use this excess of energy to launch your true self out into the world and have your experiences, overcome the obstacles, make the world a better place because you have been there, and delight in the beauty that comes from it too. When the universe turns around and is like, I love you, like, here's an amazing experience, enjoy it and recognize, like, yes, I'm part of the divine and the divine is enjoying itself right now, right? Hercules had some good times. He also had some tragedies that he overcame and went through. And that is what we're cultivating. That is what we're gestating. The individual, the person who is able to enter into any situation and be that chariot, right? Be that chariot who enters in and overcomes whether things are challenging or whether things are delightful, right? We are able to enter in to these experiences and be who we are meant to be. And with all the excess energy of fire in the summer, now is the perfect time to do it. We just want to make sure that we're mindful of the fact that we can't just expend all of our energy, right? We need to take it in. We need to cultivate it like the Queen of Cups. We need to hold it, right? And then we use that to nurture and nourish ourselves to become that King of Wands, to become that chariot, and to go out and go forth and conquer. In a great loving way, right? When I say conquer, right? Just overcome obstacles, right? Doesn't need to be whatever. Going off on tangents, but okay. So that is what came up for me when I sat meditating pretty much all day. This has been the main point of focus on summer solstice and summer and this Cancer season, and how they all interrelate, right? How that water energy and that fire energy interrelate. And I loved it because there were so many dynamic pieces, from the tarot presenting two different cards, one fire, one water, right? Two different dualities, to Cancer being ruled by, or being associated, or being a water sign in the Western tradition, and the summer being a fire sign in the Eastern tradition. There are all these different dualities, and Cancer is the time where you bring that together. And kind of like if we go to a sexual theme or we go to a reproductive theme, Gemini saw those two different dualities, right? And you got the X and Y chromosome. They get brought together in Cancer, and then Cancer produces something from that merging of those dualities, something that's able to go out and be birthed into the world, where it experiences new dualities, right? With those dualities made one, right? Where we've got our X and Y chromosomes that were put together, and now, or XX chromosomes, right? But we've got our different chromosomes that were put together, and now I'm like, oh, I totally messed up that metaphor. But it does. It takes those two different sexual chromosomes to create us, right? Those got put together. We are now this product of those two that is this whole. And we go out and we have good days and we have not so pleasant days, and we experience the dualities and we create something new from it. So blessings on what you're creating, blessings on your own path and your own nurturing of that divine spark that is able to go through this summer and go through the rest of life, and go through, in ancient traditions, that summer solstice. It's the start of the sun darkening. So it's the start of that underworld journey, right? We're able to go through our underworld journey, and we have the resources that we need. And we do it, we accomplish it, and it's great. Blessings on you and on the work that you do. And thank you. Bye.